Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Boy, we got some great guests today. And the first, I think you're going to be really fascinated with his story. We have with us Frank Walter. He's the author of a book entitled Survival After the Next Shoe Falls. And he's going to share with us some of his stories and what it's like to be in some of the most desolate regions of our country, and maybe give us some tips on how to do that and survive. He's found himself unplugged from society for quite a long time, and here and there, and we're anxious to talk to him. Frank, nice to have you. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from the Kantishna River. That's 115 river miles off the Parks Highway.
Well, good for you. How's the weather? How's the weather there today?
Oh, actually, it's quite warm. It's about 15 above. We had a Chinook blow in, but it was 50 below about a week ago.
Whoa. Wow.
Alaska is a land of great extremes. You got to be prepared for whatever happens. Wow.
Well, you're a fascinating guy. What in the world led you to leave the busyness of the big city and head out?
Well, I was born in Hackensack, New Jersey, but as soon as we moved to a farm in North Jersey, and I got my first understanding of there was a real world out there beyond the man-made one. Let's say, put it this way, I appreciate the unimproved works of God over the works of man. And there's a certain element of freedom that's valid that most people have no comprehension of. Mm-hmm. But the purpose of this book isn't, I mean, that sounds good, it's nice, but we are living in an era that I believe all of our country people have been lulled to sleep after 9/11. And I wrote this book to knock them out of their comfort zone, because I believe that we will be attacked. Supposedly by surveys, of over 70% of the people believe there will be a nuclear attack on our soil. And this book goes over that. It's fiction, but after the initial attack, I incorporate all the knowledge that I've amassed in a near half a century of living out a subsistence life. I mean, I didn't go run and hide under a brush pile. That wasn't my purpose. I ran to, not from. But people have to realize that we live in a dangerous world. Mm-hmm. And this is, we've been lulled to sleep. We've been called the great Satan by the Islamic radicals. But since abortion, and now with this homosexual nonsense, and we've abandoned our principles, our history, the natural laws of life. We have shaken. People are on the other side of the world are against us with absolute determination.
All right, let's talk about where are some of the areas that you've gone to get away?
Where have I been?
Yeah.
All over the interior. Right now I live in the Kantishna River. I still have a homestead on the Nowitna. I've been on the Anoka. I've been up the Chinjek. These are just names down Beaver Creek. I was down southeast working on a prospect. I've been trapping. I'm a registered guide and prospect. That's all I've done for almost a half century in a few months.
Now, you took your family with you and your 4 boys. It must have been quite impacting on their lives as well.
Well, yes, absolutely. And we're working on another book on straight survival, which I want each one of the boys to contribute to. Mm-hmm. I had 2 of the boys were born right out, one in a tent, one in a little cabin. I wouldn't advise people to do that because you're taking their life in your hands. But we were young and lived on the edge.
Yeah.
And I don't advise people to do that. And we could have had a catastrophe, but the Lord was with us and it didn't happen.
All right. What was it like after being in the wilderness for those long periods of time to come back into somewhat, society and back into where things were pretty active and take a look at what's happening technology-wise?
Well, I'm I'm computer illiterate, and I have no intention to become otherwise. I'm 72. In fact, I had a kidney taken out this past summer, and I'm kind of retired. I still do a little bit of everything, going out prospecting this summer. But there's a transitional phase, but I do my best to keep pace by radio with what is going on in the rest of the world, and I think it's an obligation that each citizen should have. Instead of a lot of people don't even want to hear the news. They're so preoccupied with their little day-to-day lives. They see, hear, and speak no evil, and don't want it. It makes them uncomfortable. I want to make them uncomfortable. probably the strongest passage about why I wrote this is in chapter 18 of the book of Revelation, where I believe New York to be economic Babylon, and that it is targeted. It's been targeted twice. I felt this way 30 years ago. It's the only place on the face of the earth in all of the history of mankind where all kindred, tongues, and nations come together. Through the United Nations, through world trade, there are also more Jewish people there than any place else on the face of the earth, other than Israel. And this is why it is targeted. And I look at Revelation as a book of, I'm trying to think of the word to describe it, where you have transparent overlays, like looking at the human body or the mechanism of an engine. You have to correlate these pieces. But once the Holy Spirit can guide them to do it, and someone could, I'd love to hear the argument, what other place on earth, other than New York City, could that ever be? It's not any city that ever existed. It wasn't ancient Babylon. No ships could ever go to ancient Babylon.
From your experience, Frank, can somebody just leave the city and go to the wilderness and survive and make it?
Someone would have to, first you'd have to have the gut level motivation within your heart and soul. That would be a good plus.
Right.
Without that, I don't think anyone could do it. People are our over-urbanized culture has lost touch with the natural elements of life.
Yeah.
And it's a process that you would have to go through. This book, I believe, will help. I should plug it again. This is the first opportunity I've had to do this, by the way. It's the first time I've really been on a national show in my life.
Well, you're doing great.
Survival After the Next Shoe Falls. Check it out on Amazon. I knew through a fellow who tried to set this stuff up, and he said, "Be sure you plug it." I have to. You know what I mean? It's just the way the game's played, so to speak. I hate to feel like that, but
no, that's fine. Part of your passion here, Frank, is to, in the book, is to give people somewhat of a survival guide, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That once the initial thing happens, from there on, I'm incorporating concepts. If I was there, what I would do, and applying them to the day-to-day, how they would go about doing what they're doing. And that's the purpose of it. While it's fiction, it's only fiction on the onset. After that, it's a young couple fighting for survival, fighting for their freedom, and in a world that's turned upside down, in a nation that has just went crazy.
Do you suggest a media fast for people?
I couldn't copy that. Please repeat it.
Well, would you suggest that people just maybe turn off some of these devices and go on a fast from technology?
I think they're a basic, yes, absolutely. I think they should get involved physically. One thing, if you're interested in survival any way, shape, or form, get in shape. I'm serious. I mean, if you're carrying an extra 50 pounds, extra pounds of blubber around, it's not going to do you any good, I'll guarantee you.
Yeah, right.
And that's an epidemic in our country. I hear it all the time on the radio.
Yeah. What are your 4 boys doing now?
Well, they're scattered around the country. The closest one is he's a pilot. He's a mechanic. He flies out to remote mines.
Wow.
He lives at Nenana. Another one was working. Sounds kind of strange. They had to go out and try different things in the world. Another one is worked on the barges on the Mississippi. I mean, it's kind of strange. And the other one, it just kind of, it seems kind of fun. They would get spaced out. Another one is in Oregon, Colorado. He's in transit right now from one job to another. Yeah. Go ahead.
Excuse me. How did you decide that Alaska was the perfect place to raise a family?
Well, I didn't decide it from that perspective. I came to Alaska. I was single, and I was driven here because it was the last frontier, and I chased this American frontier to the very end. Actually, civilization, if you go around the planet from where it began, where does it end, till it finally ends, meet up again. It's Alaska. And I was thought about going to Canada, but there are a lot of problems going to Canada as not a citizen. So I had to pass that up. That was my first choice. that was to go to Canada. But it's difficult, and especially to be a trapper. That was my main motivation, to be a trapper.
Wow.
And from there, I branched out guiding and prospecting.
Wow.
So that's how I paid the bills most of the years as a trapper. And we put a big garden in, and we caught fish, we hunted our meat. My wife sewed a lot of our clothes. But we didn't do it like we're back in the Stone Age, or we're worried about mapping flint or having to tan everything. And we didn't have to do that. We were with practical application.
All right. Well, the book is named, let me encourage you to get a copy of it. It's called Survival After the Next Shoe Falls by Frank Walter. Check it out at Barnes & Noble or online at Amazon, and I think you'll find it to be a fascinating read. Well, thank you for letting us have your first interview. You did a great job, and let's stay in touch.
We'll do that. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
All right. God bless you, Frank. Talk to you soon. All right. We'll be right back on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Well, welcome back. Our next guest, I think you'll here to share with us today his story. I think you'll find him to be extremely fascinating. Dr. Robert Rittenhouse is with us. He's an adoptive father, retired university professor and missionary worker with a PhD in cognitive psychology and deafness from the University of Illinois. That just kind of gives a background of the story that you're about to hear, the story of a deaf Honduran orphan. And Dr. Rittenhouse, nice to have you today. Where's your pooch? It was laying on the ground there the other day.
I banned him to the bedroom, but he's on the bed, so he's very comfortable.
No, we love dogs. We like dogs around here.
Yeah, I'm a dog lover myself.
All right, nice to have you with us today. Fascinating story. Why did you go to Honduras in the first place?
Well, actually, my wife made the first trip. A friend of hers from church invited her to go, and they were ostensibly going to help some doctors and dentists there for a week. Our church in Little Rock, Arkansas, where we lived at the time, was heavily invested in Honduras. And so Pat went. My wife's name is Pat, and she's a teacher of the deaf, and she is deaf herself, although you wouldn't know it to talk to her. Her speech is essentially normal. She's a good lip reader. But she's a teacher of the deaf herself. And while she was there, word got out that a deaf woman, highly educated deaf woman who was a teacher, was in Tegucigalpa, the capital. And it just so happened, anyway, I'll phrase it that way, and later we'll get into maybe my belief that there are very few coincidences in life. It just so happened that the son of the former president of the country was starting an orphanage, and he wanted to include deaf children in that orphanage because of some Bible reading that he had done. Wow. And so the two of them got together, and he wanted to pick Pat's brains about teaching and how to communicate with the deaf. And as they were departing, going their separate ways, Pat said, "By the way, my husband and I would like to adopt a deaf child." And that's kind of how the story got started. I'm not sure what would have happened had Pat never said anything to Carlos about wanting to adopt.
So were you really down there to look for a child to adopt?
No, it was just something that came out of her mouth as they were departing. I was a university professor. I was back in Arkansas, and when word got back to me, and my dean found out about this, she sent me down there to do workshops for teachers. So I followed Pat down 3-4 months later, and that's when I met Nori. Pat came back and said, "Boy, I found a little girl I think we should adopt." And I had just become a grandfather at the time, so given my sort of linear thinking, I guess, at the time. I didn't think that's the way it worked. So I was a little bit of a hard sell on that idea, but my dean was convinced that this was a good thing to do, so she sent me down to Honduras,
Wow.
and I fell in love with Nori and all the kids down there.
Well, tell us about your first meeting with Nori, the one you end up adopting.
The first meeting was at the mission house in Tegucigalpa, which was actually the former mansion of the president's family. Carlos had leased it to this World Gospel Outreach organization. And Nori came over, I don't know, 9 o'clock, 9:30 that night. Carlos brought her over, and I sat down with her. She didn't have any language skills. She didn't have the ability to communicate using English or sign language. She sort of had developed a gesture system. So we played a game, and you could tell right away. My background is in psychology and teaching. Are we still on?
Yes, yeah, you're fine.
Okay, my screen went blank. And but anyway, we sat down and played a game, and I could tell she was really a bright child and just a beautiful little girl. That was our first meeting, and that cinched the deal right there. I said, we've got to try to get this little girl back to the States, because she had been orphaned, and all the kids were going to school, and Nori was school age, but she was out playing in the streets because they really didn't have education services for deaf children.
How long did it take you to get her into the States?
It took about 3 months to get her into the States. We kind of came through the back door, so to speak, but we got her to Little Rock 2 days before school was to start.
Wow. What are some of the conditions of the orphanages there in Honduras?
Actually, pretty good. They're in Tegucigalpa. Tegucigalpa is it's the capital. It's probably the city most able to provide human resource services. So the orphanage that Nori was in was really a pretty nice orphanage. All the girls were quite a bit older than Nori, so they had taken her.
How old was she?
She was 7 at the time.
Okay.
And most of the girls in the orphanage were probably between 12 and 18. Mm-hmm. And they took real good care of Nori.
That's good. Was she a believer when you first met her?
No, she really didn't know anything about the Bible, about God, Jesus, any of those kinds of things. But she really we would pray every night with her, and once she developed, I'll probably choke up a little bit on this because I can see the image so well back in those days, but as she developed communication skills, she would say what my wife called the A through Z prayers, and sometimes they'd last for an hour, and she became a believer over time.
Wow. Now, how has your life been impacted through all of this? I mean, this is quite a story.
Well, it does give you a new perspective, that's for sure. I had to be literally pushed into this by my wife, but it's probably the best decision I was ever forced to make, and I'm so glad I did it.
At the time you're adopting this 7-year-old from Honduras, your grandfather, how did your children and adult children take to you adopting Nori?
Actually, pretty well. I come from a farm family, so we're fairly traditional. There had been no adoption in either Pat's family or mine, but they took to it real well. I think it's the kind of thing they would expect from me. I've kind of gone and done my own thing in life, and kind of like to take chances and risks, and so they took to it. And of course, she's such a sweet little girl, not so little anymore, but they just fell in love with Nori just as we did. But she really has changed. She changed my perspective. I, as a university professor, was really heavily involved in my work, and when she came along, it caused me to reprioritize things.
Wow. What are you doing now?
Right now, I'm retired. I do some consulting work. I volunteer one day a week down at the sheriff's office doing well-being checks on senior citizens. And then once you've worked with the deaf as long as I have, well, you become a part of their community. So with my sign language skills, I'm called on to help them with problems that they encounter from time to time.
What's Nori's future? What does she want to do?
Well, right now, she's doing her senior internship at the New Mexico School for the Deaf. She started about 2 weeks ago, and she'll graduate from Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C. this coming May.
Wow.
It's considered the Harvard of the deaf. It's known all over the world. And then she hopes to, her major is child and family studies, and she hopes to work with families of young deaf children.
Wow, what a story. Would you do it again?
Oh, yeah, I'd do it again times 5. There was a boy named Gustavo, and he was orphaned too, and we wanted to, and that's one regret we have. We didn't adopt them both, but we thought the adoption would go pretty smoothly. It didn't. Yeah. We wanted to adopt Gustavo as well, but we didn't get to do that. But, oh, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Absolutely.
All right. Where do people get a copy of your story?
Well, probably the best place is to go to Author House, the publisher of the book. All the book royalties go to the Happy Hands School for the Deaf in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And if you buy the book from the Author House, the publishing company, why greater royalties are generated, but you can also get it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Wow, okay. It's called Nori, the story of a deaf Honduran orphan. And, you know, Dr. Rittenhouse, you remind me of something I say often on the air. Whatever God saves you from, brings you through, he turns you around and makes you a minister too. That's clearly the case.
Well, you can bet that his hands were on this entire process, and if we had time, in fact, I encourage people to read the book. You'll see how timing and people and events just couldn't have happened by chance. There's a very good website. It's www.thegoodnessofgod.us, and it's a place to go. With the agreement I have with the publishing company, I have to write a blog entry once a week, so there's a good blog there and some other material in the book.
Thegoodnessofgod.us.
Correct.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your story. This is fascinating. Down the road, could you help us interview Nori?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's try to set that up. I'd like to do that.
All right. There's a technology available where you, Perry, and Nori could talk directly to each other, even though she communicates in sign language. She wouldn't even need me to be involved in it.
All right, we'll look into that. Thank you, Dr. Rittenhouse. God bless you, my friend. Nice to see you.
All right. God bless you too, Perry. Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you. Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel, and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market. But at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
All right, we're back, and it's always a delight to have John Mittendorf in the house with us. He's kind of our resident researcher, apologist, dude. And he also worked with Answers in Genesis, and he'll come to your church and give seminars and do all kinds of things to help you better defend the faith and understand some scripture. And we've been dealing with a fascinating topic. And is there really a God, and how to know God exists? And the reason we've done this series is to help you to defend your faith. And today we're going to try to wrap this up, but I tell you what, he's got a couple of big questions, John.
We're going to cover that at the end. If God is eternal, and he is,
yes,
what was he doing before he created? There's a huge time gap there, right?
So was there a beginning?
We're going to get to that. And then secondly, who made God?
Who made God?
Who made God? Those questions come up occasionally. But the notes are available as of today.
Okay.
I finally finished them. And you can either get them here or you can get them from me. And for the people that are listening or watching, my email is hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
Hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
So just write me, and I'd be happy to send you a copy of the notes. And they're probably, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 pages long, something like that.
And today is part 3. So I'm telling you, each stack of these notes is a book. So, and John has done his homework. Well, I don't want to eat up too much time. Let's get into this.
Okay, let's get into this. And as we've talked about when we started this program,
is there a God?
Let me hit the.
They may have to do it in there for you.
It's not advancing.
Okay. Okay, we got this one on. Let me help you with that a little bit. Anyway, there
we go. We started off with what God are we considering? And if you want to advance one more.
Okay.
And basically what we started talking about, it's the God of gods, the God that created the universe. And of course, there's only one God that died on a cross to save us from our sins.
Okay.
And of course, created the universe. All the same God. So we're not talking about Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the references. And this one right here, Perry, is where we started with the 4 evidences of God. And our past series, we've covered information. In other words, information just doesn't come from nothing.
Right.
You have to have a sender and a receiver. Moral values. We're the only entities on earth that really can tell the difference from right and wrong. We're born with that innate ability. Where does that come from? Where does that come from, see? And God has placed that in every person on this earth. But today, let's cover these 2, creation and conversion. And I think out of the 4 that you have here, creation is probably the most visible evidence of a God. Why? It's all around us.
Yeah.
It's all around. All you have to do is look in the universe. And you know, both evolution, if you can go forward one more. Now, why is it working for you and it wasn't working for me?
You got a dirty finger.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and there's 2, I think there's 2 subsets of this. When you talk about creation, it's either creation or evolution. And I love the comment by Dr. George Wald, and he's a Nobelist from Harvard. And I think he summarizes it very succinctly. When it comes to the origin of life on this earth, there are only 2 possibilities. Creation or spontaneous generation, which is evolution.
Right.
Which one is it? And first of all, the Bible is very, very clear and straightforward on where everything came from. Creation. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But one of my favorites is Romans 1:20. Let me read that. For since the creation of this world, even his eternal... Let me back up. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they were without excuse. It's very clear that God has made everything that we see, and he holds everybody on this planet accountable to him because of what we see day in and day out. And yet we refuse to do that. We refuse to do that.
Yeah.
So that's one side, according to Dr. Wald. The other side is evolution, which you and I have discussed for a long time on the Dove. And now let's go back to creation just for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. And on evolution is also very straightforward and clear about where everything came from. And evolution, as we've discussed before, is basically everything came from nothing. It evolved from nothing to what we see today, and it's a godless, humanistic, naturalistic theory.
Theory.
Theory. I'm choosing my words carefully.
Yeah.
There's just one major problem.
What?
Evolution is impossible. And it's unscientific, irregardless of what people think. And you and I have discussed that numerous times, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I could just go over very quickly this morning and say that evolution violates all, not some, not most, all of the scientific principles of the universe and science. All of them.
Wow.
And you've asked me in the past, sometimes where this guy says, oh, what do scientists do with that?
Yeah, what do they do with that?
Well, easy. They just raise the rug and sweep it underneath and lower the rug back down. And then a DVD comes along, like the one that you sent out to a lot of listeners of the Dove, Evolution versus God, where Ray Comfort walks into colleges, to the heads of the departments, PhDs in biology, geology, chemistry, and he says, can you give me one example of why you know evolution is true? Or can you give me one example of a species going to another species? And they look at the camera and they don't say anything because they know in their heart, particularly when they're on camera, they can't justify it.
They can't.
They can't justify it. That's one reason why I love talking about evolution and creation, is because you know where the truth is. The truth is on your side. And just a couple of examples for the people that are listening. Evolution violates the first law of thermodynamics. And the definition of a law is there is no known alternative. None. First law of thermodynamics, you cannot create energy. So where'd the energy for the Big Bang come from? Second law of thermodynamics, everything is running down. Evolution says no, everything's running up. Take a banana, put it on the table at home and give it a couple days, what's it do?
Yeah, well, comes real ripe.
It changes. And then you have the law of biogenesis. Life only comes from pre-existing life. So where'd the original life come from? You had to have a creator. And it goes cause and effect, and it just goes on and on and on. So when you take evolution and you boil it down to its essentials, it's irrelevant. So really, if Dr. Wald is correct, and he is, there's only two options. I'm not going to say E.T. is a third option, because there's absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. Either God did it or evolution did it. Well, the Bible tells us exactly how he did it. Evolution tries to tell us how they do it, but they're completely wrong. So it really leaves one choice. It's just a great example of the existence of a God. When you look at the universe, Perry, it demands and cries out for a creator. If somebody wants to believe in evolution, they have to subscribe to the theory that the president's heads on Mount Rushmore happened over thousands of years of rain and erosion.
Yeah, and they made it through the flood.
Or a can of Coke can just, you have to put your thinking hat on. Okay, let's say that I'm an evolutionist and I believe in evolution. Okay, all of what we see came from nothing, started from the Big Bang, and et cetera, et cetera. And if a person wants to believe that, they would also have to believe that a can of Coca-Cola suddenly appeared from nothing. You're saying exactly the same thing, but yet the Coca-Cola scenario is ridiculous, it's funny, but yet for some reason evolution is not so funny, but they're exactly the same. Or I'm walking along the beach and I find a Rolex watch, and if I was an evolutionist I would say, gee, look at that. That came together from the chemicals in the ocean and washed up on the beach, and here it is. It's ridiculous, right?
Right.
Evolution is no different. It's ridiculous.
I'm still amazed that the academic and science community supports it.
They have to. They have to. Because if you want to believe that the universe and human life, let's just say the cosmos, was created by a creator, God, the minute you believe that and you say, yes, there is a God, you're held accountable to God. He is the ultimate judge. And so evolution gives me a way, offers me a way to say, yes, everything that I see around us came from nothing, therefore I'm accountable to nobody, therefore I am my own God.
Right.
I decide what I want to do. And therein is the bottom line.
All right.
Pretty simple, right?
Pretty simple.
Let's go to number 4.
All right.
And that's conversion.
Okay.
And the parallel that I drew in conversion, Perry, it's interesting. When you think about this, it's really easy. We tend to take, I think, practical experience and common sense and push it aside and go for the high-tech stuff, but you don't have to. If you look at a court of law, let's say that you and I go in and you're the defendant and I'm the plaintiff. And so the judge is sitting there and he's listening to you and he's listening to me. Now, you're a lot better looking than I am, so he would probably side with you, right? What can I say?
Peggy may agree, but...
So what's the tiebreaker is a witness. When a witness comes in, or witnesses come in and they say, I saw John or Perry do so-and-so, that is a game changer.
Right,
a witness has credibility because they witnessed the event. And yet when we talk about conversion, How many people over the centuries have turned their life over to Christ, and in an instant, Christ has dramatically, and I'm going to use the word transform, their life 180 degrees. And a person is not able to transform their life. In other words, one day you're not something, the next day you're something else. You can't do that. However, when you look at down through history, how many millions and millions, or we can probably easily say billions of people could walk into a courtroom and say, yes, I gave my life to Jesus Christ, God, and God ultimately transformed or immediately transformed my life. I know there is a God because He's the only person that could do that. And that's conversion. That's the witness. That's conversion. And so when I say conversion, yeah, witness, testimony, you have a testimony, I have a testimony. Every Christian who's given their life to Christ and had their life changed has a testimony of what Christ has done for them. And in a court of law, that would be admissible. Admissible. So when we talk about this series we've been doing, the 4 basic things, we started off with information. Where did information come from? You have to have a receiver and a sender. If we're the receiver, who's the sender? It's God. Then we talked about moral values. We're the only, I'm going to say, entities or living things on earth that has, now the Bible, one thing I didn't mention the last time was, yes, we have a sin nature, according to the Bible, according to Paul. However, we still have the ability to differentiate between right and wrong.
Yeah. All right, we're going to try to bring this into a landing if we possibly can in just a few moments. John Mittendorf's with us, and again, these notes are available. We'll tell you how you can get a copy of them when we come back.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're back, and John Mittendorf's with us, and we've been doing a series, Is There Really a God? And how to know,
and how do you prove that?
And how do you prove that? And how to know that God exists. And we are wrapping this up here in the next few moments, and all of the notes that we've done over these sessions are now available. And we'll have them here at theDove. You can come on by and pick up a copy, or you can email John at
hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
Okay, hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. All right, the big question. Where did God come from?
Beats me. What do you think?
Well, I've been faced with that question a lot. And the only thing I can do is say that, how can I answer this shortly? He doesn't exist in our
in our world.
In our world. I mean, we're subject to time. He's not.
Correct.
So therefore, our human brain can't get around that. In fact, the Scripture says, "Eye is not seen, ear is not heard, neither is it enter the heart of man the things that God has prepared for them that love Him." So there's another dimension out there that we can't get our brain around.
The metaphysical world.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the answer to the question is simple, but our human ability to get our arms around it is extremely difficult because, as you just mentioned, basically everything that we do, our world, 24-hour day, is based on the clock. What time is it? What time am I getting up? What time do I have to be so-and-so? So when we apply that then to God, and the Bible tells us He's eternal, has no beginning, has no end. When we go to heaven, how long are we going to be in heaven?
Well, forever is forever.
Forever. Well, okay, but how do you define forever? In other words, there's no end. It's forever. It's hard to get your arms around.
It's another dimension.
It's a whole other dimension that we're not.
Yeah,
and that's why being able to explain this, if somebody asks you, okay, Perry, well, who made God? And you say, well, the Bible says He's eternal. And then you get these deer in the headlights look, and they go, what? Because you don't, 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It should, but it doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't. And so if you look at the Bible as an example, A couple of verses, and I just wrote these down real quick. 1 Timothy 1:17. Now to the King eternal, immortal, Deuteronomy 33:27. The eternal God, Romans 1:20. His eternal power, and so on. So the answer to the question is God is outside of our time. We don't understand that, but He is. Everything that we do is based on time. The minute that we were born, our clocks start ticking. And there's going to be one day that the clock stops ticking. But God doesn't have a clock like that. And what makes that difficult is that when we get to our next question, okay, what was God doing before He created? There had to be this eternity before. That's true, before He created. Then, as long as we're talking about time this morning, when did time really start?
Well, I don't know if we can answer that question.
We can. Let's go to the next question. What was God doing before creation? He's outside of time, but time really only started to apply to us and to our relationship with God in Genesis 1:1 at creation. In creation, Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning," there's your time right there. God created the heavens and the earth. That's when time started. So to be able to say what was God doing, yeah, it's difficult to answer that question from our perspective, but basically because He's an eternal entity, He's just eternal. He always was, He wasn't made, and He was in eternity, and then He decided at some point in time, there's time again, I'm going to create the heavens and the earth, which is Genesis 1:1. Now, if you can get your hands around that, that's basically what the Bible says, it makes it a little bit easier, but from our clock perspective, our clock didn't start until Genesis 1:1.
Therefore, evolutionists try to put a timeline on it, and that's where they come in with these billions of years.
And there's one reason for that.
Yeah.
I believe, thoroughly believe, as does Answers in Genesis, Institute for Creation Research, and a lot of creationist organizations, that the Bible is very clear on biblical chronology, that the age of the earth, and science also supports this to a large degree, that the age of the earth and the universe is around 6,000 to 7,000 years old. Now, if it turns out to be 10,000, 15,000, I can go with that. It's not 15 billion years old. And science does not really support that when you start looking at the way they date things, at the rock strata and a lot of other things. Now, why does evolution need 15 billion years for the universe and 4.5 billion years for the earth?
Well, it's the only way they could possibly make evolution fit.
That's
so that
correct.
One thing evolves into something else.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Evolution, one of the basic principles of evolution is if you give me enough time, anything is bound to happen.
Yeah.
And then we go back to, well, really? So could Windows 8, let's see, what's the newest operating system for Apple? Is it Leopard? Mountain Lion. It's Mountain Lion.
Yeah.
Can Mountain Lion generate itself if I give it enough time? Sure. Yeah. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So when you put on the hat of common sense, the whole concept of evolution is ridiculous and silly.
Well, I think there's a good point here. I never thought of it that way, and that is time began, from our perspective, the moment He started creating. That's when time began.
And what let me butt in just for a second. And what we try to do out of that, Perry, is to take the eternal, ever-present God and cram Him into our 24-hour clock.
Right.
Which we cannot do because He's eternal. And that's where we have difficulty. We say, okay, I've got my 24-hour clock over here, but then God has His metaphysical, eternal clock over here, and the two don't really mix.
You know, through the years, I've had a chance to interview people that have had either heaven experiences or out-of-body experiences. Right. And there are some similarities there, and that is that there was a sense of timelessness, and there was a sense of incredible peace. In other words, there was another dimension far beyond our human capability of sensing or understanding. Some will say that the closest that you can get to experiencing that is when you're dreaming, because you are in all positions, all places at all times, and you notice everything around you, but you never really see yourself, but you see the other thing.
Right, yeah.
You know? And so there is that feeling that that's probably the closest you can experience, that there is another dimension.
Right.
But even that doesn't begin to describe those who have had a heaven experience where it was just, it was indescribable.
When you start thinking, Perry, about time or the lack of time, I think it puts a whole new perspective on heaven and eternity that I don't think as humans, because, and here again, try to describe heaven. You can't, because we try to describe heaven in worldly terms, experiences. And yet it's totally different than that.
Yeah, eye has not seen.
Yeah, and so eye has not seen, and so I don't think we have a clue is what's in store for us.
Yeah.
We have no, if we did, I think you would see the church more visible, aggressive on Earth Day, being the salt of the earth than we are today. We just don't really understand.
Let me say to our viewers and listeners, if you want a copy of the series, of the notes of the series, we have them here at the Dove, and John has made them available, excuse me, at by emailing him. And again, John, your email.
hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
I'm sorry, I don't remember that. hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. All right, coming up, we're going to be talking about a topic that is really accelerated in some of the Christian talk shows and even preaching shows, and that is the blood moons, and the 4 blood moons in particular, which are basically lunar eclipses that have to do with the nation of Israel. Now, a lot's been said about this, and you're going to tackle it, help us get our head around it. What has been your beginning thought as you look into this?
My beginning thought, Perry, is it seems to me that when you look at us, the church, that periodically things come along that tend to sidetrack us and divert our attention. And you say, divert our attention from what? Your relationship with Christ. Bottom line, the bottom line. And so a couple examples would be here. A couple years ago we had laminin, and they discovered in the blood system that linked up with cells there was a cross. Well, that's Jesus' sign to us that there's a link between Jesus and the blood system. Well, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But can you categorically say that's Jesus' sign to us that he designed our circulatory system? Another one would be the Bethlehem star. Can you categorically say that when that hit the headlines that that was categorically true? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, is the way that I look at it. Now we're into the 4 blood moons, and just a quick definition. A blood moon is when you have a total solar eclipse and the moon moves in front of the sun, you kind of have this red aura around the moon, and the moon turns to red. In astronomy, I have to stop and think for a minute and make sure I say astronomy. Not astrology.
Yeah, okay.
It's astronomy. And there's nothing, astronomy is fine. But the moon turns red, blood red, and that's where the name comes from. And it's being linked up now that there's been specific periods of blood moons in astronomy, and a lot of this comes out of NASA, some of it comes out of NASA, and that's all true, that when you take that, you say, yes, there's been some interesting things happen in Israel at the same time as the blood moons. And so now the inference is becoming, well, we have the 4th blood moon coming up next year in 2015. And when you relate that to Israel, you could make a case for the fact that something dramatic is going to happen in Israel. And some people, I'm saying some people, are starting to say that could be the Ezekiel 38 Gog and Magog war. Now, could that be? It could be. Can you make that as a categorical statement? And that is my question.
All right.
And that's what we're going to discuss next month.
I think, and your caution here is, sometimes people will latch onto that and propagate that more than they will the gospel. More
they will the gospel, or more than their relationship with Jesus Christ, which is the most important.
We're going to start that series the next time John is on. Again, if you want a copy of these notes, get a hold of us here at the Dove, and we'll make those available to you. John, this has been a fascinating series, and I want to say thank you for your long, hard work and your study.
Well, you know, it's my pleasure. But you know, Perry, on a series like this, you know who I think gets the most benefit out of it?
Me.
We do. Yeah, we do. You do. Doing the research for it.
You get a hold of us, and we'll get you a copy of the notes. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.